Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of If You Could Hide to Kolob podcast. My name is Clive, and today we're going to be talking. Well, it's a continuation of Second Samuel. Then we're going to jump into First Kings. So there's a lot that's going to be skipped, but there's also a lot of stories. So I'm going to try and make this as interesting as possible because there is a lot of stories. I'm just sort of going to give you the brief of the stories, so that obviously you can go back and look into it yourself. But yeah, just bear with me as we get along with this today. So let's jump straight into it, and we're going to jump into the story of King David. Now, David is king, as we've talked about. Saul dies, and so David has been appointed king. Now, there's still wars going on. The Ammonites are at war with the Israelites. And so there's many people off on the front line fighting these wars. King David, on the other hand, he is not fighting this particular war. He is staying back at home. Now, David sees this woman bathing on the roof. There is quite a bit of story about why she's on the roof and things like that, which I'm not going to get into today. Definitely look that up for yourself if you want. It's law of Moses tradition about cleansing of the women at certain times. So, but anyway, so she's on her roof bathing, and David sees her, and she obviously likes what he sees. So he sends his men to go and get her for him. Now, it's interesting because David knows who she is and the fact that she's married. So she's married to this guy named Uriah. Now I'm going to read here in Second Samuel chapter 11, verse 3. David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, "Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" So obviously he knows that this is the wife of someone. This isn't some lady that he really likes. David, at this point, is many wives. As we discussed last week, he's many wives and he has many more at this stage. But he's lusting after the flesh as he does. So this is what he's done. So he goes anyway and he gets this woman and he lays with her. And now she becomes pregnant. But don't forget she's married. So this is awful. I mean, it's awful anyway, but this is awful. So David tries to come up with this plan. Okay, well, what can I do? I know if I get her husband back out of the war, get him to come here and lay with his wife, then it'll seem like she's pregnant with his child. So, I'm covered, I'm saved, my lives are saved. Now, what's interesting is that he does get Uriah out of the war, and he says, "Hey, come home, see your wife, do all these things." And Uriah's what he says back to David, it just makes him sound like such a great guy, right? He says this. This is verse 11. Uriah said unto David, the Ark of the Covenant, and Israel and Judah abide in tents. As we know, the Ark of the Covenant doesn't have a building yet. It's in a tent. Israel, people are in tents. He says, and my lord Joab, this is the captain of the going up the wars, and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go into mine house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife, as thou livest and as thou soul livest? I will not do this thing. Who am I to come out of this war, go into my home when there's so many people out there that don't have this opportunity right now? There's wars going on. The Ark of the Covenant doesn't even have a home. Why should I have that privilege of just being pulled out and being sent to my home like that? That just seems so unfair. So he doesn't go home. In fact, he sleeps outside, and it doesn't really work out for David. So now David's desperate to try and, again, still cover his lies and cover the things that he's done wrong. So what he does, awful, awful, awful. David sends Uriah back to the front lines, and he seals a letter that he actually gives to Uriah to say, don't open it. Give it to Joab, the general, and he will open it. And this is what the letter says. This is in verse 15. Set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die. So not just put him right on the front line of the worst battle, but put him on the front line, then retreat. Then it's guaranteed that he's going to die. That's basically David killing him himself, essentially. It's awful. It's a terrible, terrible thing. What happens next? Well, he goes out and he dies. And the word gets back to his wife, Uriah. Sorry, his wife Bathsheba. He's Uriah. Verse 26. And when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she mourned for her husband. And when the mourning was past, David sent and fetched her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Now, don't forget, David's not the king, but he is a high priest. And he is a king. He's not the prophet, but he is a high priest. So he does have a certain expectation. He does know the Lord, and we know all the things that the Lord has done for him. And so now the prophet comes and visits David. The prophet knows of this, the Lord has spoken to him. And so Nathan is the prophet at this time. Nathan comes to David and sits him down, and he speaks to him in a parable. And he said, it doesn't say, David, you've done this thing wrong. Not yet. He says, let me tell you the story. You tell me how you would react to this. Okay. So we're now in chapter 12. So this is Nathan speaking to David. There were two men in one city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had exceeding many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing save one little ewe lamb. But he had brought and nourished up, and it grew together with him and with his children, and it did eat of his own meat and drank of his own cup, and lay in his bosom, and was unto him as a daughter. So, I mean, this doesn't really resonate with a lot of us. Maybe there's a lot of farmers out there or people that really like their sheep. I imagine this is like some people are like, oh, my dog is my child and my cat or whatever, whatever it may be. So sort of think that of yourself, you have this one and somebody has a ton, and, this one grows up with you and this belongs to you. This next verse, it's a little bit confusing. I'll read it, but then I'll explain it. And there came a traveler unto the rich man, and he spared to take his own flock and of his own herd to dress for the wayfaring man that was come unto him. So he wanted to dress and prepare his animals for those that were coming, but took the poor man's lamb and dressed it for the man that was come to him. So he didn't take his herd that he says he has many of. He took this poor man's lamb, the one lamb that he had, dressed it. So basically killed it and prepared it for a meal for these wayfaring men that come. Now David is angry with this, and he says, Nathan says, what should be done with this rich man? And David says, obviously we kill the man. Like, that's not what he's done. It's awful. He says that David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. And he says, how could he do this? That's an awful thing to do. And Nathan says this, it's really powerful. He says in verse 7, Nathan said to David, thou art the man. This man in the parable that's taken, the rich man that's taken this one ewe from this poor man, you are that rich man. You're the one that's taken this. And this really struck David. And he, there's still a lot of back and forth, but David really feels this deep, and it cuts him deep, and he truly starts to understand what he's done and this awful thing this awful sin that he's committed. So David gets on his knees and he repents, and he repents to the Lord. And you can actually read, it's more of the feeling that he felt. It's Psalms, Psalms 51. I don't think they're actually split into chapters. Psalms, I think it's just called Psalms. So if you look at Psalms 51, that's David pleading to the Lord about this thing that's happened, and, asking for forgiveness. So let's look at verse 13 of chapter 12. It says, and David said unto Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said unto David, the Lord also, I'm going to jump down to just my translation, hath not put away thy sin, that thou shalt not die. So there's a thing here. So at the moment, the punishment isn't going to come to David. The punishment isn't going to be here right now. The Lord has a punishment prepared, but it's not going to happen right now. So don't feel like you've been let off. And it actually references Doctrine and Covenants, section 132, verse 39. And it says, David's wives and concubines, the Lord speaking, obviously, David's wives and concubines was given unto him of me by the hand of Nathan, my servant, and others of the people who had the keys of the power. And in none of these things did he sin against. So I'll just pause there. None of the things. So these wives and concubines, that wasn't a sin. That was given to the Lord. We were talking about here about polygamy. That was okay. But in the case of Uriah and his wife, therefore he hath fallen from his exaltation and received his portion. For he shall not inherit them out of this world. For I gave unto them unto another, saith the Lord. Imagine not being with your family in the next life. That's your exaltation gone. So yes, there is a punishment affixed, but it might not be there straight away. It makes me think of Elder Uchtdorf a while ago. He spoke about how, I think I might have mentioned this before, but it really resonated with me. He talks about how he was training to be a pilot, and he had to do some exercises, and there was a lot of people there that smoked and drank, and they were running better than he was. And to him, he felt like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, and these guys seem to be better off than me. But obviously things come later. I'm not saying they will punish, but the Lord provides in ways that we don't understand. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. That we just got to rely on him and just see what happens. So now, moving on, let's talk about what happens with this child between Bathsheba and David. In verse 15, and Nathan departed unto his house, and the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bore unto David, and it was very sick. David therefore besought God for the child, and David fasted and went in and lay all night upon the earth. So again, David is very sorrowful, but now there's this child that he's got that has become very sick. So let's read verse 18 and 19. It came to pass on the 7th day that the child died, and the servants of David feared to tell him that the child was dead. For they said, Behold, while the child was yet alive, we spake unto him, and he would not hearken unto our voice. How will he then vex himself if we tell him that the child had died? Now, I see that as more like when the child was sick, David just stayed away from everyone. Like, I've got to focus on this. I've got to prepare myself. Like, I'm fasting. I'm doing all these things to help this child. So that's why he sort of stayed away from his servants. But when David saw that his servants whispered, David perceived that the child was not dead. That the child was dead. Therefore, David said unto his servants, Is the child dead? And they said, He is dead. So this obviously, he fasted and he prayed, and there was nothing more he could do. There is a bit more talks about that. Well, there's nothing I can do about it now that the child is dead. So that's, I'm not going to try and justify why the child died, but that's what happened. That's the child that was born in the sin. But then Bathsheba later on, so she now marries David, and they do have a son, another child. This is verse 24. And David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and went in unto her and lay with her. And she bore a son and called his name Solomon, and the Lord loved him. So Solomon actually means beloved of the Lord. So, we got to remember that Lord has made covenants with people that their line is going to continue on. He's made covenants all the way down the line. David was a great man, and the Lord knew that, as time went on, the line would continue through him. So there had to be someone born or a child born that would continue on the line. And so Solomon was born, and Solomon becomes a great man, quite different to David. Now, that's where Come Follow Me sort of tells us to stop with Samuel. There is some really interesting stuff in Samuel, like more giants, guys with 6 fingers on hands, or 8 or something like that. It's really interesting. 2 Samuel 21:20, and there was yet a battle in Gath, and there was a man of great stature that had on every hand 6 fingers, and on every foot 6 toes. Interesting. And David's servants slew those giants. Interesting. Just there's a lot of interesting stuff. Samuel, Kings especially. there's a lot of really interesting stuff that we're going to get into now. So we're going to jump to 1 Kings chapter 3. Now, just to preface what we're up to here, King David grows old, and very old, and he eventually dies. So now Solomon, his son, he becomes the successor, and he becomes the king. And Solomon is a great king, great, actually, one of the best. Solomon secures his borders, and he actually marries the daughter of the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, and brings her to the city of David. And he does these things. He does a lot of actually these things because he tries to harbor peace with a lot of different people and with a lot of different places. Historically, Egyptian pharaohs rarely gave their daughters to foreign kings, which underscores just how powerful Israel had become. Because, we talked about how they'd scattered and there'd been civil wars with them all. But, obviously now something incredible has happened. Solomon is doing the right thing, and he's just really good at judging and just ruling over. So let's jump to verse 4 of chapter 3. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer upon the altar. So now Solomon goes and offers 1,000 to the Lord. And the Lord is very pleased with this in verse 5. In Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I shall give thee." So obviously accepting his offering, because, 1,000, it's not like he's going to go get me 1,000. Like this, he would have worked for this, and it would have been a major sacrifice. It's like giving all your money at tithing and going, "Here, take all my money for the week or the month," or I don't know. We'll work out the exchange rate yourself, I suppose. Okay, so let's jump to verse 9. Give therefore, so this is what Solomon asked for, give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad, for who is able to judge this, thy so great a people? The Lord's come and said, what do you want? You can have any, I accept your sacrifice. What would you like? And this is what he asked. I want perfect judgment. For me, it would be, oh, man, I got a million questions. But, Solomon doesn't ask for anything like, tell me this and tell me that, and hey, make me the greatest king of all. He's gone, give me perfect judgment so I can be a perfect king. And the Lord says, and the Lord is greatly pleased. And don't forget, the Lord loves Solomon. He knows what Solomon's going to end up being like for a bit. No spoilers here. Let's jump to verse 12. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. Like Solomon is the be-all and end-all of perfect judgment. This is verse 13 now. This is what the Lord says to him. I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked for, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. So the Lord is so grateful. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but the Lord is so pleased with Solomon that he's asked for this perfect judgment, not for riches, not for honors, that he's gone, I will give you what you asked for. And because you did that so selflessly, I'm going to give you these riches and these honors. You'll be the richest king in all the county and all the land, and you'll be the perfect judge. Like, how grateful would that be? Well, how grateful would you feel? You do something so selflessly, and you'll be blessed 1,000 times, 1,000 on 1,000. All right, so now there's this really famous story about these two women that come to David. So two women came to Solomon. So I'll start again. Two women came to King Solomon. One said, I have a child, and this woman living with me also had a child around the same time. She lay on her child and it died, and she stole this child from me. And the other woman obviously denies this, says, no, it's the other way around. This is my child, and she stole it from me. And now Solomon, being a wise in judgment, asks for a sword. And in verse 25 it says, and the king said, divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other. It just seems like a terrible idea. I mean, killing a child, that doesn't seem like the way to do it. In fact, Josephus explains that the people mocked him for it, laughed, said, "This isn't a right king. Like, who would do that?" The woman's response was interesting, and I want to talk about that. So, this is 26. Then spake the woman whose living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son. She said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. Now, interesting here. So here's my theory of what actually went down. Instead of her saying, yes, let's divide it and we'll both have it, it was more like, okay, well, if one of us can't have a child, then neither of us should have a child. That's fair. And that's the way I see it more. And I think that's really what it's getting at there. Where the other one said, no, that's an awful idea. I would rather that child be given to somebody else than to die. And Solomon, in his perfect wisdom, said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. Now, the people, so I'm going to read from Josephus here. The people, this was like a massive turning point for Solomon. It says, Now the multitude looked upon the determination as a great sign and demonstration of the king's wisdom, and after that day attended to him as to one that had a divine mind. So this is a really turning point for him, that people look at him with absolute respect and perfect judgment and say, well, this is our king. This is a true king. This is the one that, we've been waiting for, essentially. So it's really interesting there that, that was a massive turning point, where to us, it just seems like an awful, awful example of things. All right. Now, again, Come Follow Me's ask us to skip to chapter 6. So there's not a crazy amount happening in 4 and 5, but let's jump to chapter 6. Now, we're going to talk now about Solomon building a temple for the Lord. Now, the temple is built, and I'm going to actually put a picture of, so I asked the AI program that I use, I said, all right, here's what the Bible says about it. I put it all in. I said, now I want you to take any references that you can find on the internet, from whether it be Dead Sea Scrolls or other religions or anything. Take all the information you can about what the Solomon's Temple would look like and put it into a picture. So I'll put that picture up now so you can see it. And if you're listening to this in your car and not seeing it while you're driving, I'll put it up on our social media as well. It's really quite incredible. It's nothing new. If you've seen Solomon's Temple before, it's really nothing new, but it's just interesting that, we've sort of worked out the way it would look, and it is quite nice. So the house was 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, which is roughly, 90 feet by 30 feet by 45 feet. But there's more to it than just that. So let's look at verse 7, chapter 6. And the house, when it was in the building, was built of stone made ready before it was brought thither. So that there was neither hammer nor ox nor any tool of iron head in the house while it was being built. That's interesting. That they off-site, they've constructed all the things they've needed to construct so that no tools were actually in the vicinity of where the temple would be, like in the courts or anything of the temple, which I think was really, really interesting. Obviously massive labor intensive work to build it offsite and bring it. I mean, it's got to be all perfect before you bring it to there. So it's just interesting, like there's really mighty work put into a lot of these things in ancient times. Now, the interior was lined entirely with cedar, completely hiding the stone. So interesting. And then covered in pure gold. It does go through a lot of, how it was built and what they did and when they were building it. But what I found really interesting was the Lord warned them about the things that's been happening. Look, I'll just read and then we'll talk about it. So we're going to jump back to verse 12 and 13. Concerning the house which thou art in building, so that they're currently building it. So it's the Lord sort of saying, put a stop and went, hold on, let's have a chat. Concerning the house which thou art building, if thou wilt walk in my statutes and execute my judgments and keep all my commandments to walk in them, then will I perform my word with thee, which I spake unto David thy father. And I dwell among the children of Israel, and will not forsake my people Israel. So, yes, fantastic, a temple. But remember that a temple only works if those that are in the temple are going to keep the commandments. These things will only come to pass if you remember the things which we've spoken of. You can't just walk into a temple off the street. This is why we have, temple recommends. It's not that we, hey, we only want paying tithe payers to go in, and it's not that. It's a temple is only a temple because the people that go in there are prepared, that it's sacred enough. There's no, there's a reason why at the end they say, do you feel worthy to go into the temple? And a lot of people, I think, in fact, just on Sunday, they were talking about, it's that question is like, are you sure? It's like, I feel like everyone should be, yes, of course I'm ready, because even though I'm not fully prepared or, I'm still worthy. Like this is the Lord's house and I still want to see the Lord. If the Lord were to come through the door today, would you hide or would you go, here I am, Lord? I think, anyway, the temple's a temple and it's an incredible place. So let's keep going. So Solomon builds, his house. So he starts building his own house. It takes him 13 years. It does mention that at the beginning. And it goes back into the temple of it. It's the temple part. So now they're talking about the molten sea or brazen sea. This is for washing the hands and the feet. Now let's talk about that. That's a really interesting thing, and that's up on the picture as well. So it measured 10 cubits from brim to brim, about 4.5 meters in diameter, and it stood 5 cubits high, about 2.5-ish meters high. Total circumference of about 13 meters. Actually, I think I was going in feet before. It's about 44 feet, 45 feet, something like that. So now this is the interesting part, right? It sits on top. Well, I mean, the whole thing's interesting, don't get me wrong, but it sits on top of 12 oxen. Very familiar to us. The 12 oxen obviously represent the 12 tribes of Israel, bearing the burden of spiritual cleansing and service to God. So they go and they wash their feet and wash their hands, prepare to enter the temple. 3 oxen facing north, 3 south, 3 east, 3 west. It contained about 9,000 liters of water. And it was so big because, it had to accommodate all of them. You don't want a big queue waiting at the front. All right, my turn to wash my hands and feet. Like, they can all do it same time, then go in. Now, let's move on to chapter 8. Now, chapter 8, as soon as the Ark of the Covenant, so the Ark of the Covenant obviously was taken into the temple. That's one of them, a lot of the reason why this whole thing started. The Ark of the Covenant was taken in, and it was pretty much dedicated. Now, let's have a look at verse 10 of chapter 8. And it came to pass when the priests were come out of the holy place that the cloud filled the house of the Lord. And we talked about this last year with the Kirtland Temple. When the Kirtland Temple was dedicated, the Lord filled the house in a cloud. And, it's basically the Lord saying, this is me accepting this. I want to read this here. This is from, it's called the Everyday Bible Companion. It's what I've been using a lot to study. It's really good. It says, Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord in the presence of all the congregation of Israel and spread forth his hands toward heaven. When King Solomon dedicated the newly constructed temple with a prayer to the Lord, he stood with his hands open and his palms lifted towards heaven. This stance was often taken when praying, especially in Old Testament times. I've been watching the World Cup, if anyone else has been watching it now. Hopefully lots of you. It's very great. I've noticed that a lot of when the players are praying, they're holding their hands up to heaven and they're sort of praying. And I'm sure they do this in a lot of religions. I remember as a missionary, we spoke to this one guy and we'd fold our arms and pray before and after the lesson. He wasn't obvious of our religion and he was very anti at the beginning. But we didn't convert him, but we definitely wore him down to listening to some lessons. But he would sit there with his his hands open, his palms up towards heaven, and he sort of leaned back. And he would explain to us that, this is him keeping open to the Lord, like being an open vessel, a symbol to say that I am here to talk to you openly, and I am open to receiving the message. And I have no issues with that. I thought it was great. Solomon did the same thing. A lot of people in the Old Testament do that. We do cross the arms and bow our heads in more of a reverence thing. We tell the kids that, so you're not playing with things or touching anything. But, it's, if the Lord were to walk in the door, like I mentioned before, I wouldn't run over to him and go, I'm open, come speak to me. I'd definitely be bowing down. That's sort of the way I see the representation of it. I just want to jump to Second Chronicles, which chronicles, just like Leviticus and Numbers, it sort of repeats a lot of the things that's already been spoken of into different details. So if we look at Second Chronicles chapter 7, verse 12, it says, "And the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said unto him, I have heard thy prayer and have chosen this place to myself for a place of sacrifice." So again, he comes and he says, I have accepted this house of ours. I'm curious, if he does that every time. Speaks to the prophet when the prophet goes, dedicates, Anyway, let's not get into things like that. Okay, verse 17 and 18 of Second Chronicles chapter 7. "And as for thee, if thou wilt walk before me, as David thy father walked, and do according to all that I have commanded thee, and shalt observe my statutes and my judgment, then will I establish the throne of my kingdom according as I have covenanted with David thy father, saying, there shall not fail thee a man to be a ruler in Israel." So again, the Lord's making these promises to these incredible people who start off just absolute strong beings. And you read things like Saul, great man, King David, great man. You think, if they fell, how much harder is it going to be for regular folks like us? Anyway, let's not ponder on how difficult things is. Let's take every day as it comes. Give no thought on the morrow, as he says in Doctrine and Covenants, which I'm probably taking it way out of context. But anyway, moving on. Chapter 9 of 1 Kings. Chapter 9, God makes the same covenant with Solomon as he did with David, as I just read there in Second Chronicles. It basically, it's the covenant. The Lord appears to him, makes the covenant. It's everything that that's been mentioned already. So let's just jump to chapter 11. So we're going to skip a couple of chapters here, or in fact, just chapter 10. For those that are awesome at maths than I am, we're just going to skip chapter 10 as Come Follow Me says, and we're going to go to chapter 11. So chapter 11 starts with a familiar tone, right? There's great and mighty men fall. Let's see what happens here. Chapter 11, verse 1. "King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughters of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites." Definitely got them all correctly pronounced. So something's going on here. He's loving these strange women. Verse 3. "And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart." Now he's got 700 wives, 300 concubines. And that's a lot of people, first of all. But there's a lot of people there then to turn his heart away, as it says there. So now he's not following the Lord as it was, but starting to follow the wrong path. It says in verse 4, "For it came to pass when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father." So obviously some wickedness is happening here. He's turning away from the Lord and he's starting to worship these idols. Let's read verse 9 and 10. "And the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned from the Lord God of Israel, which had appeared unto him twice. And he commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods, but he kept not that which the Lord commanded." So, I mean, the Lord's appeared to him twice. Again, it's how difficult is it for someone like this to continue down the straight path, who would have seen God twice, but then still turn away? Just difficult. So God's appeared unto him again. And this time, not with the promise of anything you want, because I can see who you are, but more of a sentence, a judgment. So this is verse 11. "Wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon, For as much as this is done of thee, thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee. I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servants. So, this promise that I've given you of these kingdoms, if you're not following my commands as I've asked you to, you're not worthy of it. Verse 12, notwithstanding in thy days, I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. Now remember, God made David a promise and loved Solomon and said that I will, my promise is that he will be this ruler. So he's saying, I'm not going to take it from you. I made a promise to your father, but the kingdom won't follow your line. So I didn't make the same promise about your son. Verse 13, howbeit I will not rend away all the kingdom, but give one tribe of thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen. Okay, so there's a bit of a thing here. So I'm just going to explain what's going on at this point. But it might be, look, I mean, it depends on how much of a learner you are, if you're a visual one, if you want to write this down. Okay, so Hadad was a royal survivor of Edom who had escaped to Egypt as a child. It sounds like I'm reading it because as I read these chapters, I had to write all this down. I thought, if I don't read this as I've written it, it's going to be so confusing. So Hadad was a royal survivor from Edom who had escaped to Egypt as a child when David's general, Joab, remember Joab, he was the guy that agreed to that letter that was given to him from David to slaughter Uriah. So when David's general Joab slaughtered the Edomite males, Pharaoh gave Hadad a house, lands, and his own sister-in-law in marriage. Upon hearing that David and Joab were dead, Hadad returned to Edom to wage a guerrilla-style war against Israel's southern border. Okay, with me so far? Rezon fled from his master, the king of Jobath, gathered a bunch of men, and seized control of Damascus. He became the king of Syria and was an active adversary to Israel throughout the remainder of Solomon's life. So essentially, he's choked off the north side of the trade. The southern border by Hadad has been choked off as well. So Israel now is sort of stuck in the middle of this. So why is this important? Well, let me explain. As Jeroboam was traveling out of Jerusalem, the prophet Aljah, I'm hoping I'm saying this right, Aljah the Shilonite, met him on the road. I wonder if I can read this part. Yes, I will. This is verse 30 and 31 of chapter 11. And Aljah caught the new garment that was on him, his own garment, and rent it into 12 pieces, and said unto Jeroboam, take the 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdoms out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. Okay, so now let's look at what's happened. So the wickedness of Solomon has caused that, Israel is under this vicious attack and is losing. 10 of the tribes of Israel are going to be scattered to this kingdom of Jeroboam. And the 2 tribes that have been promised to David will continue down the line. So there's 2 tribes that are going to continue, 10 tribes that are going to get lost. Now, I'm going to read the Joseph Smith translation of this next bit. So if you're reading along, it's going to be jumping back and forth from the bottom to the top because that's where the Joseph Smith translation is. So I'm going to read 38 and 39. And it shall come to pass, if thou wilt hearken unto all that I have commanded thee, and wilt walk with God, and we walk in my ways and do that is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did in the day that I blessed him, I will be with thee, and build thee a sure house, as I built for David, and give Israel unto thee. So this guy instead of Solomon. 39. Okay, straight into just the translation. And for the transgression of David, and also for the people, I have rent the kingdom, and for this I will afflict the seed of David, but not forever. Okay, so let's give a bit of understanding of what's happening. The Lord, speaking through the prophet Ajah, promised Jeroboam, the kingdom that Solomon is now ruling, and that if he rules righteously, that he will have everything that was always promised to David, and he will have all of these things. Okay, now Solomon learns of this and is very jealous of Jeroboam. Says in verse 40, Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam, and Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt unto Shishak, the king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. So now Solomon goes off and so he's hiding, but Solomon is obviously still king again, like Saul. We're not just going to take away their kingdom. And then there's actually a lot in the Acts of Solomon. I don't know if I have anything written down, but Acts of Solomon is, because it does mention it here in verse 41, and the rest of the Acts of Solomon and all that he did and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the Acts of Solomon? Like, of course they are, obviously. So the Acts of Solomon, you can read that. It doesn't give us really any new insight. It talks a lot about the things that Solomon has done, but I think, from memory, again, it's been a while, but I think it was written like way, way later, like 40 BC. So, that's why it's not really in, if it's 100% correct or what it is. Anyway, I'm skipping ahead here. I'm sidetracking myself. This is sort of the conclusion here. So this is verse 43 of 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 43. Very last verse. And Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his stead. So obviously we know that's not going to turn out too well for him, but now Solomon has died. So again, a lot of great people have turned away from the Lord, and the Lord has, obviously there's a punishment affixed, and the Lord has dealt his judgment perfectly. So anyway, fascinating stories. I hope it wasn't too confusing or too boring. Maybe next time I should try different voices like I did with my kids when I'm reading them books to make it sound more interesting. But I hope you're all able to follow along. And thank you so much for listening to another episode of You Could Hide Kolob podcast. Follow us on all social media. Listen to us on any platform where you get your podcast from. We're also on YouTube, so listen to us there. And we'll see you next week.